what do you want to call him? Do you call him Roger's house or Worthington's house or
My grandfather.
your grandfather's house, Lucy's grandfather's house in Leek, Staffordshire.
Now, is that the one he was raised in?
He wasn't born in that one, no. His father built that one, and then his father died and left 6 children, then the eldest one was 12.
Oh.
And Roger came, Sybil was the eldest, and then there was Guy, and then there was Gwen, and then Roger, so he was 4th. So I think for about 2 years between each of them, so 12, 10, 8, 6, perhaps Roger was only 6 when he died. Well, there were 2 younger than him. And then his mother went on a cruise and met this widower and married Mr. Wilson.
Okay.
And Roger thought it was so funny having a mother called by something else, so he always called her Mrs. Wilson.
What was his mom's first name?
His mother's?
Yes.
She was Margaret Maud
Okay.
Pearson.
Okay.
I think she was a Pearson staff. Yeah?
And what about her father? His father's name?
Oh,
Was he a?
I can't remember. I can't remember what his Christian names were.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Should know. Am I on tape yet?
Yeah.
What about the war now, the Second World War? We were actually on holiday from Chatham, giving up our house there, a furnished house, and going into the quarters for the captain of the paymaster captain at the Naval Hospital at Chatham. And we were on holiday on the east coast, and he was recalled after we'd been there about 3 days, because they thought war was coming. And all the children from Chatham were being evacuated to get away from the bombs, in case the bombs came quickly. So we didn't think it was any good taking our 3 back to Chatham. Anyway, we knew our house there that we were just moving into was going to be taken over by the nursing staff, the extra nursing staff they'd need through the war. So I had Marjorie Pope with me then. So we got into the car and went down to Budleigh Salterton in Devonshire. We started off early in the morning, and we spent the night with my aunt, Aunt Claire Shepherd, and the next day, before lunch, at 12 o'clock I think it was, 12 noon, the then Prime Minister was Attlee, I think, Clement Attlee. No, don't know who it was, I'm not sure. Anyway, he at 12 o'clock, in announcement to the nation that we were now at war with Germany. And we'd arranged to go on to my sister Bessie at Budleigh Salterton, so she put us up for 2 or 3 weeks. I went back to Chatham and packed up our clothes and things there. And then we were lucky to find a very nice little furnished house in Budleigh Salterton. So we moved in there, and after a year or so there was a funny smell up on the 2nd floor. It was a house with downstairs dining room, I think, and kitchen, and the drawing room was on the 1st floor and 1 bedroom, and there were two rooms upstairs. One of them there was a funny smell in it, so we'd had a friend from Chatham who wanted to be evacuated. She was living with us at Budleigh Salterton, so she'd gone home because it was a phony war the first year. Nothing was happening, no bombs were sent over or anything. So she went back to her son who lived outside Chatham, and we wrote and said we were awfully sorry that with the smell up in that room, we'd need her room that she had on the floor below. So, and then a very nice unfurnished house came on the market, and our furniture was still in our house in Elverstoke. So I took the house for the duration of the war at Budleigh Salterton, and had our furniture down there. And we were lucky enough to let our house in Elverstoke to naval people. And we then only had petrol for one car, and we had a big family car, and we also had a Morris Minor, a baby car. So Roger kept the baby car at Chatham, and he came down when he could to Budley to see us. He came down for Christmas and brought a turkey with him because it was very difficult to get turkeys, rations and stock and everything. And we were very happy down at Budley. It was a lovely little place and a very nice little house there. And I had Marjorie Pope with us, who was nursery governess, I suppose you'd call her. Margaret was then at school at Budley and went on to Lymington, to school there as a boarder. Rosemary went to a day school in Budley, and Trisha was quite small then. I don't think she went to school at all, but then Marjorie Pope was called up in the war, so she left us. And I didn't like being alone with the children. I couldn't get away at all to Chatham. So I got onto an agency, and there was a French lady who wanted a job, who'd managed to get away from France before the Germans, well, when the Germans had invaded. I think she got away from Marseille in a coal ship. What do you call a coal ship?
Freighter.
A coal freighter. Well, I don't think that's quite what we call it, but never mind. So Mademoiselle Keltot, I think was her name. She came to us at Budley Salterton, and I thought we'd all learn French, but I'm afraid we were too lazy and we spoke English. And she stayed with us till we went back to Chatham. And well, no, we didn't go back to Chatham. We went. My husband was then at the Admiralty. He'd left Admiral Drax. Admiral Drax had been retired, and he was working at the Admiralty, and he found us a furnished house near Harrow, and then we moved to. Jimmy, are you taking pictures as well? We moved to Claygate and bought a house there and had our furniture brought up from Budley Salterton, and we stayed there till the end of the war, and then returned to Elverstoke. My husband was then about due to retire, so he retired, and after a short while we moved into a bigger house in Elverstoke. And while we were at Budley Salterton, there were bombs, one or two bombs at Budley Salterton, always when I happened to go and visit my husband at Chatham. But one fell on Woolworths, and one fell on the church opposite the house we'd taken for the war, unfurnished. But we'd left by then, and the people who took it, I think the baby was in the pram in the front, but there was no damage except broken glass. But they moved away, I think, after that. And anyway, we managed to get our furniture out of the house back to Claygate. And Claygate had one or two bombs early on, but it didn't do. No, Chatham had one or two bombs early on. Fortunately, didn't kill anybody. And we had the doodlebugs coming over us when we were living at Claygate. I never saw one. I heard one coming over one night, but I was too lazy to get out of bed and have a look at it. And then when they got bad all around us at Wimbledon, we moved downstairs and all slept downstairs. We had an Anderson shelter, which was a oblong iron top with 4 legs, and we put a mattress down there, and when the girls were home from school, two slept in there, and one on the floor in that room, and I had a mattress at the foot of the bed. Well, it wasn't a bed, it was on the floor, and there was a big window behind the back of the room facing the garden, so we had a big tall cupboard in front of that in case the glass came in on us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were in there and got into bed, my husband, we shut the door, and he had a camp bed outside the door, just outside the door, because the staircase was one side and the wall of the sitting room was the other side, so he was safe from glass. Well, we did have the glass broken one night from a bomb which fell in a farm just below the house, and my husband also did one night a month, I think, in case there was the alarm going on. He had to go out and see everybody was all right, because they had a census of the people in all the houses, so they'd know who was there if bombs did fall on Claygate. But we didn't have anything very near, except that one that shattered some of our windows. And people who had children under 8 didn't have to do war work, or if they were over a certain age. Well, I had my youngest Tricia with me then. She was under 8, so I didn't have to go off and do war work, but we had a very good British restaurant which they'd started up during the war, which were, you didn't have to give up coupons for your meals there, and it was all very reasonable. It was for anybody who wanted to go there. Well, the school children in Claygate, it was at their school, they had lunch at 12, and then after that the public, in the holidays I suppose, were allowed in for lunch, and we used to go and help serve lunch, and if the cook and his wife were away, we'd fill in and cook the meals, but wasn't for a huge number, but it was a great thing to have a British restaurant, because we could keep our coupons with our tiny joint of meat and other foods, for the weekend. And so that was very satisfactory, and Roger used to go up to London every day by train. He got the little car with a small petrol allowance in case the line was bombed. He used to go up on Sundays in the car, and one Sunday when he was up there, the Guards Chapel in Whitehall. It's not quite in Whitehall, I don't think, but it was next to his office. That was bombed, but he was all right. And we had the doodlebugs going over us quite a lot at night. But they had the Home Guards, were old retired people. They were out to watch for bombs, and some of them had guns and things, and there were some guns around, and I was always afraid they'd shoot down a doodlebug and it would fall on us if it doodled on over beyond us. One didn't worry so much. But otherwise we were lucky. We didn't have any of the family killed in the war. My two brothers my eldest brother, Edgar, he was working at the Compass Observatory to start with. That was after the war, I think. Anyway, he was called up, and he went out to North Africa when the Germans had been routed by the
Mussolini?
the soldiers out there. And then he went on to Sicily and Naples when after we captured North Africa. And my eldest brother, Edgar, he was there then. And he stayed there, I suppose, till the end of the war. And John was at sea, my youngest brother. and he'd left the Navy before the war, but they were both recalled for the war, and then he finished his, he was doing an electrical engineering course, and he got one more term to do, so he did that and got his degree in that, and then he joined the General Electric Company and was sent out to Singapore. That's all after the war. And meanwhile, we'd come back to Elderstoke. My husband had retired, and I've been here ever since. First in our smaller house in Beech Grove, then 4 years in Fort Road, overlooking Stokes Bay. And the house wasn't a very satisfactory house, and one became available, the one I'd always wanted in Beech Grove, which wasn't available at the time. And so we moved back to Beech Grove. We were there for 16 years, and then Roger died there, and I moved to Two Little Green, which was a new lot of houses, and well, about four houses in a row, and had a nice little garden there, and finally I became too old to manage on my own, so here I am in the nursing home. So is that all you want to know,
Seems quite
or what
happy.
do you want?
Well, when was the time that you were in the Far East, in India? I guess it
Oh,
was.
in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong.
Oh, well, when I was, you want my whole family history. When I was, when at the beginning of the First World War, the three of us were sent to Sherborne as boarders, and I was a boarder at Sherborne School for Girls till I was nearly 17. And then my father was appointed as Commodore Hong Kong to HMS Tamar, which was an old troop ship, and we had quarters on board the ship. So I left school one term early anyway, just before I was 17. We all went out to Hong Kong, except for my young brother, who was only 8, and he was left behind, I'm afraid, at a prep school. But he had my mother's sister just near Sherborne, and she had a daughter the same age as him, so he had company there. But of course in those days you couldn't fly anywhere. It took us 6 weeks by sea to get to Hong Kong, so my mother never saw him for 2 years at all. And then my father was given a 6-month extension in Hong Kong, but my mother, I think, decided, because she wanted to get back home naturally, and John was expecting her home for the summer holidays, so she went home ahead of my father, and Gladys, who was only 15 months older than me, she and I stayed out with my father in Hong Kong until Christmas 1924. We left just before Christmas in 1924. We spent Christmas on board and New Year's Day on board, and the youngest passenger, who wasn't a child, and the youngest officer on board, I was the youngest adult on board at the age of 20. I rang the ship's bell. I'm not sure if I rang the old year out or the new year in, but one of us rang the old year out and the other one rang the new year in, so that was
very cool.
quite something. And we got home in January and found life very dull in Sherborne after our gay life in Hong Kong, where we had our own ship's boat, our pinnace, I suppose you'd call it a pinnace, I can't remember the right name for it. Anyway, we used to go out bathing most days in the summer and take about 6 of the young naval chaps around out with us. And we had a bungalow up at the peak, so it was nice and cool in the summer up on the peak, and lived in HMS Tamar during the winter, and did all the entertaining during the winter, and had 2 tennis courts in the dockyard of our own. So we played lots of tennis with good tennis players out there. And my husband was my father's secretary, so that's where we got to know each other very well. And so we thoroughly enjoyed life in Hong Kong. When I was 18, I won the ladies singles tennis championship in Hong Kong. The reigning champion out there beat me my first summer out there, but she'd gone home on holiday the second summer, so I managed to win. But when she got back again, we'd come home the summer after that. So I don't know if I would have beaten her or not. But Roger won the naval tennis championships the 3 years after we got back from Hong Kong. And he played at Wimbledon, and I told you how he played it. 1 year he played Hennessy. The year he did play Wimbledon, he played Hennessy. And they had this cartoon in the Daily Mail with Worthington v Hennessy, one each side of the net with a glass in each hand, and saying cheers. And a little man in the corner of the picture, he was saying, "I hear Hennessy serves doubles well." So that was when we were stationed at Chatham after we were married in 1926. We were married, and I suppose we were at Chatham for about 6 months. No, we must have been at Chatham more than that, because Margaret was born at Chatham. We must have been at Chatham for nearly 18 months, I think. And then my father came down as Admiral of Submarines at HMS Dolphin, and so we came to Alverstoke. My husband was a secretary again, and bought a house in Beech Grove. And when we were appointed away from after HMS Dolphin, we went to Malta for 2 years. And my father retired and bought a house in Alverstoke, and we used to come second summer from Malta. It was so hot out there. We came back for 2 months. The ships were always away on a cruise in the Mediterranean during the summer months. So a lot of the wives came home in the summer anyway, and we went back again after 2 months. And finally, when we had our honeymoon, the general strike came in the middle of it, so we were married on a Tuesday and went down to North Devon for our honeymoon, but after, I think it was Sunday, the telegram should have reached us, but it didn't because it was so far, we were right in the country. And on Monday morning, early in the morning, when my husband was in the bath, telegram came recalling him to Chatham, so we had to leave very quickly and drove all the way back to Chatham, getting there about 11 at night, and calling in at Sherborne on the way to collect a few wedding presents and a few sheets and things to get into the furnished house we'd taken in Chatham. And we had 2 or 3 nights with the captain of the dockyard, who'd always said he'd put us up while we moved into the house there. And then after, when the strike was over, we went back and collected one weekend. We went back and collected some more things from Sherborne. And I'm getting rather out of right years, I think.
Yeah. So, well, I was wondering, Mom mentioned something about a nanny that y'all were getting ready to go to South Africa or something. She got a nanny that paid all attention to Trish and never paid any attention to her.
Yes, I know.
Did you ever go to South Africa? Or?
No, we didn't. No, after the second period, I think it must have been at Chatham. Roger was appointed to HMS Amphion, which was building in Portsmouth Dockyard, and she was going out to South Africa as the flagship. And we'd been in touch with naval people in South Africa, and we'd got a house lined up out there at the naval base out in South Africa. It wasn't at Cape Town, it was about 20 miles from Cape Town. And then Admiral Drax's secretary died, and and Roger was appointed then as secretary to Admiral Drax. So instead of going to South Africa, we went to Plymouth 3 years.
Okay.
But I got this nanny, the nanny we'd had in Malta. I fell out with her because she would sit. Which one would it have been? Trisha? I mean, that was in Malta days. Perhaps I'm getting too far ahead again. No, when we were going, that was it. When we were going to South Africa, somebody said, "Oh, it's no good taking a good-looking nanny, a young nanny who's good-looking, because she'll get married out there. So much better take an older nanny, you know, who travelled a bit."
Mm-hmm.
So I got this nanny who had very, very good references, been with a colonel in China, I think it was, and so I suppose I must have interviewed her, and I took her on, but as you say, your mother disliked her intensely. I think it was partly when we were at Plymouth. The two, Trisha, you see, was only 3, I think, about 3 when we went down there, or less than that perhaps. And so so she and Rosemary both had to sleep in the same room, which was the night nursery, and with Nanny. So as soon as she got Trisha put to bed, poor Rosemary was put to bed too, you know, to get rid of them out of the way. So she disliked that was very hard on her, really. They always said, "Oh, you know, we didn't take any interest in us when we were small," but that wasn't right. We were always around there, and we always tried to be in the, you know, after tea.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were always taking them for picnics and things at the weekends. We played tennis in the afternoon, you know, and they went for a walk with Nanny or played in the garden. But I didn't realise till she got so bolshy, your mother, with this old nanny, that I had to decide to give old Nanny notice and get somebody young who was very nice. And so so she went, the old nanny, but that's the one your mother disliked.
So give us some more dirt on my mom.
Well, then we now after Plymouth we came back to Elverstoke. That was it, to our own house.
Mm-hmm.
And your mother went to school in the Crescent. I showed you there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the middle house with the pillars was the school. It was a little day school run by 2 sisters, the 2 Miss Mays. They were known as Muggy May, one of them anyway. And I used to take her down on the back of my bicycle to the Crescent. And then Roger was appointed to Chatham Naval Hospital, and so after Christmas we went to Chatham to a furnished house, while the secretary's house, then he was paymaster captain he was going to be paymaster captain at the hospital now, which had a naval quarters and semi-detached house there in the Naval Hospital grounds, and we wanted there were only 4 bedrooms, I think, and the captain before Roger only had 1 daughter, a grown-up daughter, but we wanted, and so they used the 4th bedroom as a box room. Well, we needed all the bedrooms, so they said they'd make the attic floor it in, so we could use that as a box room.
Mm-hmm.
And also we had the dressing room made into a 2nd bathroom. And so we weren't due to move into our house in the hospital grounds until the weekend when war was declared. And so we gave up the furnished house a fortnight before war was declared, and went up on holiday to Haysborough on the east coast in Norfolk. And that's when Roger was recalled to the hospital because they thought war was coming. And after our fortnight was over, we still had the car. We drove down to Devonshire, having a night at Dorchester with my aunt on the way. And I think after that I've told you most of what we did. We had this furnished house to start with at Budley, and then the unfurnished one, and then went back near Harrow to come from, not near Pinner, I can't remember the name. And that's when Tricia got a poisoned foot. Her temperature shot up one day. She complained of a stiff ankle and her foot swelled up, and she had a temperature of 105. So she was rushed into hospital, and every time she put her foot to the ground, as long as she kept it up, her temperature went down. Up shot her temperature again. So finally she had to have a cut along the top of her foot. You can't see it on that. And to drain the pus out. And I think she must have got a bit of poison from in those days there were black stockings, I think, from a stocking in between her toes or something. And God, the poison was, it wasn't showing where it was coming from, but anyway, it drained out. And then, of course, when they wanted it to heal up, it didn't want to heal. Meanwhile, a child went into the children's ward at the Northwood Hospital and developed measles. So I said, could we have Tricia home before, hoping that she wouldn't have taken up the bug, but she did it, so she had measles at home. And so I had to nurse her through measles. And then I got a thyroid trouble, so I had to have a thyroid operation. And that took away all my energy. And Tricia grew very tall and thin then. And she wasn't ever very strong as a child after that, but she's now grown and seems very healthy now, fortunately. So she seems full of energy with all her tennis and everything. So I think that's mostly the history of my life, isn't it?
So, did Grandpa spend most of the war in London then, or did he?
Yes, he started off at Chatham, and then he stayed on at Chatham with Admiral Drax for a bit. He left the hospital when Admiral Drax was appointed quite soon after war broke out to Admiral at Chatham, Commander-in-Chief at Chatham. So Roger went as his secretary again, and he had a big secretary's house in the dockyard. There was a row of houses there, and the heads of the dockyard all had these houses, and I managed to get him an awfully nice housekeeper. I went back to the Draxes, stayed at the Great Admiralty House where he was to start with, till he was able to move into this big house. And next door to us, when we were in a furnished house waiting to get into the house at Chatham, in the hospital, next door to us was a Roman Catholic priest, and Margaret Hooper was his housekeeper. And as it was all in a row there, we made friends with her, and she had a cat, and the cat had kittens, so the children used to go in and play with the kittens. And when I went back there, I said I'd have to find a housekeeper for Roger during the war while we were at Budley Salterton. And somebody said, oh, there's a housekeeper that's been working for a Catholic priest who wants a job. So I immediately rushed up to see her, and she was all for leaving him that day. I said, no, Margaret, you must give proper notice. And so she went to Roger while he was at Chatham, when Admiral Drax, when they appointed another commander-in-chief after Admiral Drax retired, because he'd really retired before the war, but he was a good admiral, so they thought he'd be good at Chatham. They didn't think much of the one who was there at the time, I think. So they had one bomb near the Naval Hospital, or in the grounds of, no, not in the Naval Hospital, the grounds near Admiralty House. But nobody was hurt, fortunately. And then when Admiral Drax finally retired, that's when your grandfather went to London and worked as the number 2 to the Paymaster General. He was an admiral, and his number 2 was a captain. And that was when we were down at Budley. And then when the bombing wasn't so bad, he got this furnished house near Harrow for us for 6 months. And after that we found an unfurnished one at Claygate, which is near Esher. And he used to go up to the office every day from there till the war ended. And he was about due to retire in a month or two's time, so he just finished off his time at HMS Collingwood, which is in Gosport, a naval establishment in Gosport. And then he retired.
Oh, okay.
And we spent, the house we were in, he thought was too small. He wanted a 3rd sitting room so he could have his own study. And so we bought one in Fort Road, which overlooked the Solent. And after 4 years, the bigger house I'd always wanted in Beech Grove became vacant again. It was sold the day we moved, actually, to Fort Road. And so when it was available in 4 years' time, the garden in Fort Road was much, much too big for us, and Roger's arthritis was getting very bad in his leg. So we moved back to Beech Grove to this bigger house, and we were there for 16 years, and then when he died I moved to Tulip Green, where I was for 30 years. So I was there for longer than I'd been anywhere.
Wow.
So we moved around quite a lot.
So
I think that was more or less the history of our life.
well, what were Margaret, my mom and Trish like as kids?
Oh well, Margaret was normal as a kid. Well, I mean, she was normal all the time.
Yeah, but what were some funny things that they did?
Oh, what were the funny things they did? Well, I think they were like ordinary children. I don't know if they did quite so much fighting as you did when you were young, but then they had a nanny to keep them in order. And they weren't, under our feet all the time. But, Margaret she went to day school when we were at Plymouth, to start with. The 2 youngest Drax children were taken up to school, and the only son, who was Walter Drax, who was Lady Drax called the Miracle because she'd had 4 daughters first, and then Walter arrived, and he was in the car, and I think he used to tease Margaret like anything, going up to school with the sailor driver. And I think Margaret's hands she always found difficult. She didn't coordinate very well, and she could never open the car door, I think, and I think Walter used to bully her a bit.
Oh no!
But she never complained. She wasn't a complaining sort. And then she went as a boarder to school at Lymington because we thought she'd be better away from home for a bit. And Rosemary had an awfully nice a lady who came in and gave her lessons at home, and there were two boys who were about her age, friends of mine. They had boys, so they came in and did lessons with her in the morning. We had a small sitting room there, besides the drawing room and the dining room. Of course, Roger was over at the Evans office all day, so they did lessons there while they were at Plymouth. Tricia was a bridesmaid to one of the younger officers in the office when she was 3 or 4, I think, and they had the wedding reception at a big hotel in Plymouth, and it was just on the end of a road where poor sort of houses were, and I think there were small boys outside the hotel, and the 2 sailors carried these 2 little bridesmaids down with a plate of cakes unknown to anybody, and the next morning, on Sunday morning, to everybody's disgust, there was this discussed. There was this picture in the local paper, the rich giving cakes to the poor or something, and there were the two sailors holding the two little bridesmaids, one each, with a plate of cakes, and all these poor little urchins in the row. That didn't go down very well, as you can imagine, with the Commander-in-Chief of the Naval Drax.
So was Trish one of those bridesmaids in the picture?
Trish was one of the bridesmaids.
Oh,
Yes, she was about 3. And they had, the bridesmaids had very dark, rather dull blue dresses, and I didn't think they were at all suitable for two little bridesmaids so young, so I suggested perhaps the bridesmaids could have chiffon over the top. And I think it was all a pink chiffon or some pale colour over the top, so, you know, it didn't look so heavy. And because they were wearing real heather wreaths round their heads. Well, they were rather heavy, and they carried quite heavy bunches of heather as their bouquets. And the other little bridesmaid was the bride's goddaughter, and she had very straight, fair hair. And of course, the wreath didn't stay put on her because it was so heavy, it was always going crooked. Trish's hair was curly, so the curls kept hers more or less straight in the right place. But they were all very nice. And then Trisha was bridesmaid to her godmother, who was Violet Closier. Her husband was head of Clark's Shoes at Street. And her parents were she and her parents were in Hong Kong. She was a great friend of ours in Hong Kong. And that's why I asked her to be godmother to Margaret. And she was married outside Oxford. We went to Oxford for the day, for the wedding. And Margaret had a lovely frock given to her by, I think in those days the bride had to produce all the bridesmaids' dresses, and, well, I suppose like Mary Rose did for you. And so she had a lovely white chiffon dress. Well, it was off-white, with a frill round the neck, and a little frill on the short sleeves, puff sleeves, and a sash, a wide sash with a frill round each side, and a frill round the bottom. Well, then, when we were at, that was Margaret when she was 8, I suppose. Can't quite remember what year it was, but no, I think she was only 6. She was the only bridesmaid, and we left her. It was a little church out in the country. Am I still on? It's a little church out in the country, and Violet was bringing her bridesmaid's bouquet with her, and she walked up the aisle, pulling her frock up one side and holding the bouquet in the other, and it had still got the paper around it. And it was tissue paper in those days. It was long before the what's the paper they have now around flowers? Not cellophane. What do you call it? Is it cellophane paper?
Yeah.
Yes. So I got her. We were sitting, of course, the outside of the pew, second pew. So I got her to, I suppose in her left hand was near me, so I got her to let her dress come down that side, and collected her bouquet and took the tissue paper off as quietly as I could. So she was holding her bouquet, which was very pretty because it was in the spring, and it had hyacinths and spring flowers in with it. So it was a round bouquet, and it was very, very pretty. She looked awfully sweet too in it. And I say she was the only bridesmaid. She was very good, and it was a lovely sunny day, so their photos were taken in the garden. Now there ought to be a picture of her. I think she must have got it still, so you better ask her when you get back if she can show you the picture when she was a bridesmaid. Oh no, that was Margaret I'm talking about, aren't I? Somebody ought to have that picture of Margaret as a bridesmaid. And then when we were at Playgate, Roger's cousin, Lucy Thornley, her daughter, Bill and Connie, her daughter Connie got married during the war to Bill, who was in the army, and Tricia was bridesmaid to Connie, and she was the only little bridesmaid. Connie had 4 grown-up bridesmaids, friends of hers, and they were wearing soft green dresses made out of bedspreads because material was all on the coupon, so you couldn't afford to give up your dress coupons. So if you wanted something special, you bought a bed cover or something from a shop which you didn't have to pay coupons for. So their dresses were green, so Tricia had a bit of the same stuff as their dresses. Margaret's dress, although Tricia was much older at the time, she was much slimmer than Margaret had ever been, and the sash was added round the bottom, you see, it was the same material, so it had a flounce, an extra flounce round the bottom, and she had the green sash which matched the other bridesmaids, and as it was the spring, she had a wreath of real primroses on her hair, which was very pretty. So Tricia ought to have that photo somewhere.
Wow.
So that frock came in well, and I think probably passed on to somebody else as a bridesmaid's dress, or the satin petticoat was. It was over satin, over its own. It was all made up over the satin.
Oh, okay.
So that was during our time at Plymouth. We had 3 years at Plymouth, I think, during the war. Well, when we had the doodlebugs. And then the other ones, what were they called? The last lot of bombs they were dropping, the ones that went straight up in the air and down on you, so you didn't know they were coming. They got you before you knew it.
Yeah.
The rockets?
The rock. I suppose they the rockets. The V2s, that's what they are, the V2s, because they were placed in Holland, I think, and then I think we bombed them and stopped them. While we were at Claygate in the summer with beautiful blue skies, when we were defeating, after the invasion, we used to, I think it must have been after the invasion, we used to see them going over in clouds over Germany and bombing Germany. No, it'd been before the invasion, I think, took place. And you know that a lot of the landing craft went off from Stokes Bay here. Before all that playing fields, you know, each side where we went yesterday, that was covered with gorse before the war, and there was no front made up at all. It was just shingle right up to the grass.
Okay.
And after the war, and then they had to asphalt all over the gorse. I suppose they cut it down first, but it seemed to be gorse there after war. They'd taken some of the tarmac away, you know, so the tanks could go straight onto the beach, onto the landing craft. And then they took all the gorse away and made it all nice and flat there, so that it could be playing field. And usually, I say, there are a lot of children playing football down there weekends, or picnicking down there.
Probably not going on today, so there's a nicer day.
So that's all the rest of my life's history.
That's very good.
But I think I can tell you much more. Well, then your mother, no, I can tell you after your, Margaret's school was, they left Lymington because they didn't think that was safe there, because that was near Southampton. They thought Lymington would get bombed. So they went down to North Devon, and then that was so far away that a lot of the mothers took the children away from the school, and the staff left. So then they came back near Salisbury, and she finished school there, and she never got her school certificate because she couldn't pass in English. She took it, she could pass in every other subject, but she never got her English. And in those days you couldn't take one subject, you had to take the whole lot together. So that was rather hard on her. And then she did, She did a bit of Pittman's shorthand when we were at Claydit going over to Wimbledon every day. And then she didn't seem to mind the bombs coming overhead. I didn't think so. I don't think she was ever near a bomb, but it didn't seem to worry her. And then when we got back to Elverstoke, she did a bit more Pittman's, and then she did a year doing a science, what do you call it, home science, no, what do you call it, sewing and cooking.
Home ec.
Hmm?
Home economics, home ec.
Is that what you call it?
Uh-huh.
No, we called it something else in my day. I can't remember quite what we called it. And then she went as she did do one or two terms, or a year or two, I don't know how long it was, as under matron at one of the local schools. And then she got into the civil service and worked to begin with on HMS President. I don't quite know. That's a ship that's still in the Thames, I think, moored alongside. I don't know if it's training quite or what it is. But and then she got her flat in London and moved to various departments in the civil service in London.
Okay.
But Rosemary and Tricia both went. Rosemary went to Sherborne, I think, at the beginning of the war. I suppose it must have been about the beginning of the war. And Tricia went to. No, Rosemary went to Sherborne from Claydit to start with, that's right. And I did an awful thing because we got the information about when term started, and it said term started on Friday, something of September, say it was 14th of September, Friday the 14th. And then I didn't bother to look over the page because I always remembered we started school on a Friday. And of course I'd forgotten that boarders always went the day before.
Oh no.
And we'd gone to London to celebrate the last day at home and gone to the cinema, I think. And when I got home I fished out the letter from the school which had you always had to sign a health certificate to say they hadn't been with anybody infectious going off to boarding school. And I found that she should have gone back on the Thursday, on the day we'd gone to London.
Oh, no.
So I felt terrible about that. So I rang up the school and told them what had happened and said we put her on the train the next day. And I thought, well, at Waterloo, I thought if she was very upset at going off alone, so I got a toothbrush and nightdress with me in case she wanted me to go too. But fortunately there was a Sherborne girl in uniform on the platform, so we went up to her, and I think her mother had done the same thing. I think she was a new girl too. So Rosemary was quite happy going off with her, so we were really relieved about that. And she was 13 then, I think, when she went to Sherborne. And where did she go to school when we were at Oh, she went to day school at Claydit, that was it. When we were at Claydit, she went to day school. No, Tricia went to day school. Gretchen day school. I didn't think she went to Sherborne straight away, no, she went from Sherborne from Hatch End, that was it. Hatch End was when we were near Harrow. It was at Hatch End we were living for 6 months.
Just died.
She went from then.
Something just died.
Has it been?
Behind me is Tidal Creek. We used to come out here and sail little sailboats, little short ones. And beyond, back